Hi, welcome to Archon's Academy at Press 1 for Fireball. I'm Archon, and I'm here to teach you Dungeons & Dragons.
Press 1 for Fireball.
Today's video is an overview of what exactly is Dungeons & Dragons. It's designed to help make it a little less intimidating for you to get into a game, either with your friends or with someone like myself who is a professional dungeon master. Let's begin. Those of you who are watching on Instagram Live will not get the slideshow. You'll have to go to my YouTube or Twitch for that, but the rest of you will be able to follow along. So a brief history of Dungeons & Dragons. Originally it was created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. It was first published in 1974 by Gary's company called Tactical Studies Rules, TSR. Both of these gentlemen have unfortunately passed on since then, but they are the inventors of the game. They created it and the original rules that it was played by. Currently, it's owned by Wizards and Digital, which is under Wizards of the Coast, which is owned by Hasbro. So Hasbro currently owns the rights to Dungeons & Dragons, all the copyright material. It's under Wizards of the Coast, and they created a new branch or division that's called Wizards and Digital, who oversees all of it. Currently, we are in the 5th edition, which was released in 2014, which emphasized a balance of roleplay and combat. The rules are designed to have a mix of both. They are about to redo these. It's not going to be a new edition, but they are going to come out with new books in a couple of months, but it's still going to be in the 5th edition. The culture impact. Dungeons & Dragons has grown from a niche hobby to a global phenomenon. I'm sure you've heard of it. You're obviously here for some reason. It's been featured in shows such as Stranger Things. It has its own movie, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, that was very good. I recommend both if you haven't seen either. But chances are you've at least seen or at least heard of one of those. Currently, there are millions of players worldwide with a vibrant online presence, and Dungeons & Dragons, both as themselves or through other people, have been represented in numerous conventions all across the world, very popular in the United States. So what is it exactly? Dungeons & Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game, TTRPG, usually played between one dungeon master, referred to as the DM, and 3 to 5 player characters, referred to as PCs. PCs have their own individual character sheet with modifiers based on rules and player selections and play their part in the story. So what does that mean? You, as a player, have a sheet that has your character's stats on it, and you play your character's part in the story. And you advance the story along. The Dungeon Master is the rest of the characters, which are called NPCs, non-player characters, the rest of the story and world, including being the narrator and the referee. So the Dungeon Master helps facilitate things for all of the players. They also fill in all the background stuff, everything in the world that the players aren't, or that the players don't create or come up with themselves. The Dungeon Master fills in the rest of that and facilitates the game between the players and the story. The typical game flow is you start by roleplay. You do your roleplay. So you describe what your character wants to do or what your character says to the other players or to the NPCs. So you would say, as a player, I would like to jump over this table. Then you roll a d20, or usually it's a d20. It sometimes is other dice, but d20 is the main dice for Dungeons & Dragons. That is a 20-sided die. Then you look at your sheet for your character, and your sheet will have different modifiers on it, which I go over in some other videos, which I will put in the comments so that you can see those as well. But you would apply your modifiers. So let's say you have a +4 to athletics jumping over the table, you would add 4 to it. Let's say you rolled a 15, +4 is a 19. Then the Dungeon Master, their role is to interpret that result and narrate the outcome. So as the player, you get to choose what your character is attempting to do at all times. You can try anything that you want. But then the Dungeon Master tells you if you are successful or not. So with a 19, that's a pretty high roll. The Dungeon Master in their head will have a difficulty challenge, a DC, that you have to tie or beat in order to do that. In Dungeons & Dragons, the ties always go to the attacker. In this case, you as the player, you're the person trying to do the action. You are the attacker. Let's say it was 12. I would say, yes, you jump over the table, and with a 19, you do it with some flair, landing on your feet, and you stick the landing. So that's a typical roleplay. That's how it would happen, and then another character or yourself would say what they want to do next. And those interactions are what make the game go. Now let's get into some Dungeons & Dragons core content. These are core rulebooks published or approved by Wizards of the Coast. Some of the stuff, especially lately, they've got into publishing third-party stuff, so that's why it's all considered core if it's published through them. The big ones are the Player's Handbook, which they're about to redo in a couple months. This is the primary resource for players. This contains rules, character creation, combat, equipment, spells. It has all of that you need to create a character to play in Dungeons and Dragons. The other really big one that they're also redoing is the Dungeon Master's Guide, the DMG. This is essential for DMs. It provides guidance on world building, adventure creation, and running the game. A lot of rules and mechanics are in both of these, but especially in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Then they have source books that expand on rules, settings, and options. A lot of these are optional, but they're all built to work in their other core content. That's the benefit of Dungeons & Dragons core content, is it's all written to work together. Some examples of this are Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. That was a big one 2 or 3 years ago. That was a lot of optional feats, optional rules, optional ways to create your character that a lot of dungeon masters have embraced. Another good one is Xanathar's Guide to Everything. That also contains a lot of stuff in it. They also publish official adventures and source books that give you the rules, settings, and adventure structure if you are a dungeon master trying to run an adventure. So what these are is these have the story, these have the characters, everything I described that the Dungeon Master has to do. These have all of that in it so that you can see how to run that story for your friends or for your players. Some of the good ones are, a lot of them are good, but the Curse of Strahd, the Monster Manual contains a ton of extra monsters that you can add into your game, and Glory of the Giants is a great story for beginners to play through that includes a lot of different kinds of giants and published stuff that works with everything. Now, in addition to that is what's called homebrew and custom content. Homebrew, stuff brewed at home, is custom content created by players or dungeon masters. This includes everything from settings, stories, and rules to other characters and races, whatever you can think of. If you came up with it at home and it's not yet published content, you can get it published. This would be called homebrew. This allows for creativity and personalization in your games and in your world. All 3 examples that you see here are things that I've created. The 2 on the sides. One is Axel's Arena that I have that you can fight different monsters in the arena, and then there's a bar attached to it that I have a lot of mini games in. I have the Beastmaster's Derby, which is a story that I created where you have to tame a beast and then you get to ride it as a mount in a race against other players. And then this guy in the middle is Buzztavius. He's a Bumblegruff, which is a race that I created that is playable in my worlds. He is the main announcer for Axel's Arena, so when he gets fluttering, he has a really deep, vibrating voice. These are all things that I created that my players get to play in and enjoy. It's all homebrew. There's tons of homebrew stuff out there, and a lot of it works in addition to the core rules. So lastly, what I want to go over is the structure types. There's 3 that I want to go over with you. The first one is rules as written. This is strict adherence to the official rules as outlined in the rulebook. So anything published by Wizards of the Coast or anyone previously who owned the rights to Dungeons & Dragons. Rules as written means you follow them to a T. You take the words literally as they are written, and that's how you play the game. All of their stuff is balanced for consistency and balance in the gameplay. So if you play rules as written and you don't leave any of it to interpretation, you just take the rules as they are, you will have a balanced and fun game. And that's part of the big thing that Wizards of the Coast has to do, is they balance everything and make sure everything that they publish works together. There's also the rule of fun. So the rule of fun is flexibility in rules to enhance enjoyment and storytelling. It prioritizes the player and the dungeon master experience and creativity over strict rule adherence. A lot of people call this the rule of cool. Basically, it means something like, the rules don't allow that, but this is so cool, or we're having so much fun doing this that I'm going to allow it, I being the DM. Not every DM plays this way. A lot of times they'll let you get away with it once in a while, but a lot of dungeon masters and game masters will use a balance of the 2. The last structure type I want to go over is what I call the rule of the sandbox, or the rule of logic. This is my DM style. A lot of dungeon masters use this style. Basically, between the rule of cool, the rule of fun, and raw rules as written, I've made a sandbox that we're going to play in. So these are the rules. If you can make it happen in these rules, cool. Let's do it. Let's get away with it. Let's see if we can break it. And if we do, it's my job as the dungeon master to either fix things or change things in a way or roll with that so that we can stay in the sandbox and play together. But a lot of times I have players who say, oh, I can do that. I say, yeah, as long as you can explain it and justify it, we can do it. A lot of dungeon masters like to use this. Thank you. I hope this was informative. Like I said, I wanted to keep it a brief, just overview of what the game is to make it a little less intimidating for you. You can visit my website, press1forfireball.com. It's also on the P1FF profile here. You can find me on Twitch, YouTube, and Instagram. It's at press1forfireball on all of these. Please subscribe and turn on your notifications for future lessons. I do have 2 already going over the mechanics of actions in combat. I hope to add more videos to this, so comment if you would like to see other topics covered in the future. And feel free to jump into one of my games on RPG Club. They do buy the seat pricing, so you can jump in as an individual or a group of friends. You would each get your own seats. I have a lot of games that are beginner and veteran friendly. I have some that are separate, and I have some that work well together. So don't be intimidated. Either jump into a game with your friends, or like I said, check my links and jump into a game with me. I would love to have you as a player. Thank you.